There's so much information about fighting game history that a lot of people don't know about. I don't think that they understand just how much fighting games were at such a disadvantage back then. It's really, really impressive. So somebody asked me this question. Falcon on Twitter asked, do you think Street Fighter will ever be that big again like Street Fighter 2? And that's such an odd question. Because, you know, one of the first replies from Noisy Child was like, let me tell you about a little game called Street Fighter 6 with $1 million prize pools. And what's really, really interesting about that is that I would say, and this is, I'll read you directly my tweet that I responded with. I said, it's a weird one because right now, there's no comparison that more people play Street Fighter 6 today than Street Fighter 2 back in the day. But I don't know if it's more popular. I actually don't know if it's more popular. I said, that's a weird conundrum. More people playing it is a result of a lot of factors, but popularity isn't one of the factors that's contributing to the people playing Street Fighter 6. You know, I would actually argue that Street Fighter 2 is more popular in its heyday than Street Fighter 6 is now because of the cultural impact. This is something that I've talked about a lot, is the cultural impact. Mach and X Soul says Street Fighter 6 in Japan is very close to that right now. Yeah, Street Fighter 6 is huge in Japan right now. And the crazy thing about it is, it's still like, is it as popular as Street Fighter 2 was back in the day? And so like a lot of people are like, that doesn't make any sense because if more people are playing it now, how does that gel with the fact that it was more popular back then? And the reason why is because of the cultural impact. What I said here is Street Fighter 6 is doing well in gaming circles, but everyone knew about Street Fighter 2 when Street Fighter 2 was big, even outside of gaming. Look at everything that Capcom does for Street Fighter. Oh, here's a new Street Fighter thing. What do? They show Street Fighter 2 graphics. They use Street Fighter 2 audio. It's always Japan, Hadouken. Even when they're promoting something in Street Fighter 6, they show the Street Fighter 2 arcade cabinet. Everything shows Street Fighter 2 stuff. You don't have 700 Hollywood movie references because of Street Fighter 6. Street Fighter 6 is not going to get Hollywood movies putting Hadouken into their movies. Street Fighter 2 has gotten Hadouken into, like, it was in Shazam, right? The first Shazam, one of the Asian kid, after he gets big and he can shoot things, he went Hadouken, right? There was a Champion Edition machine in Captain Marvel. Hadouken! That's because of Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 became so big that everybody knew what it was. It's like the only video game that my parents knew anything about because there was a movie, there was G.I. Joe action figures, there was a cereal, there was everything. And the reason why I labeled it as Street Fighter Fever up here is because the only other video game in history that has achieved this level of pop culture awareness was Pac-Man. Back in the day, it was all called Pac-Man Fever. That's what we all called it. It was called Pac-Man Fever. There was a disco song called Pac-Man Fever. Someone wrote a disco song called Pac-Man Fever, right? There's been 1 million Pac-Man games since the original Pac-Man. More people have probably played some of the later Pac-Man, maybe, I don't even know. But was it as popular? No, it wasn't. Like the original Pac-Man is where everything comes. Everyone knows. Like if I do that, like more people in the world will know what I'm doing, right? And I have said so many times already that like every time I go to a new location and I take the Uber from the airport to the venue, there was like, what are you here for? What are you in town for? Video game tournament. Oh, what video game tournament? Yeah, I'm here. You ever heard of Street Fighter 2? And like the reaction's always like, oh, I remember Street Fighter 2. They would say stuff like that. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm here for Street Fighter 5. They're like, they made a 5? Like 5 was probably played more than Street Fighter 2, but like everybody's like, they made up to a 5? One of my favorite stories to tell about Street Fighter 2. When it came out on the Super Nintendo, let me tell you, the fever for that game, like it sold out everywhere. It was so hard to get a copy of that on the Super Nintendo. My parents used to own a video store, right? They owned a video store, video rental store. They rented out video games. They rented out Nintendo games. They eventually started renting out Super Nintendo games when the Super Nintendo got popular. So whenever me and my brother wanted to buy a video game, we would go with our parents to a store that I believe was called VPD. And it was the giant wholesale price distribution center for movies. So if you owned a video store, you would go to VPD and you'd buy 4 copies of this movie, 8 copies of that movie. It's really popular. But every time me and my brother wanted a video game, we would go with our parents to there because then we would get a lower price on the games, and because it's for business, we would get it tax-free. But they, it was always like, oh yeah, we're getting this game to rent, but they would get it for us, right? So we would always get the game. And so every time we went to this place, this VPD with these little kids, we'd run up to this old lady, curly hair, glasses, maybe on a chain, I don't know. And we're like, hey, oh my God, do you have Mario Kart or do you have Super Ghouls and Ghosts? And she'd be like, what? This is the same lady like every time too. She's like, what? It's called Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Let me look in the computer. What is this called? What is this called? Super Ghouls, like, GHOUL, all that stuff. And eventually she'd be like, yeah, I think we have it. Or, doesn't look like we have anything called by that. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. When Street Fighter 2 came out, on the Super Nintendo, we went to VPD, we were in the store, we walk up to that lady, we're like, do you have Street Fighter 2? And she responded with, no, that game sold out so fast. It's long gone. Dude, this is what I mean. We didn't even have to explain, say anything, like she was just like, oh no, that game is sold out. Like, we don't have that anymore. You're too late. We didn't have to explain shit. There was one time we were taking an Uber from a venue to go to dinner, and 4 of us are just like crammed in this little Uber car. And the guy in the front seat was like talking blah, 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 blah. And he was saying stuff. And then eventually he was like, yeah, my dog's name is Vega. Not after the Street Fighter 2 character, but after Quentin Tarantino, because there's always a character named Vega in like all of his movies. Nobody in the car had mentioned that we were playing fighting games. We were all talking about something completely different. None of us were talking about fighting games at all. We never mentioned Street Fighter, nothing. And he was like, yeah, not the Street Fighter character, blah, blah, blah. And we were all like, you are in the right car for that reference. You are in the right car for that reference, dude. It's crazy. Everybody knew what Street Fighter 2 was. You didn't have to be in any gaming circle. It was everywhere. People were playing Street Fighter 2 everywhere. You know how popular this was because the tech back in those days would get everywhere. And we had no internet. And that's just because there were so many people playing. You would journey around to different arcades, trying to find people to play, trying to find better competition because you wanted to get better. People have asked me before. I remember an interviewer one time asking me, they're like, yeah, so, back in the original Street Fighter 2 day, what was the FGC like back then? And I'm like, what FGC? And they're like, was there still a rivalry between East Coast and West Coast? And I was like, bro, it was my arcade versus the arcade across town. That was the rivalry, okay? It was basically, my arcade is better than your arcade. That was the rivalry back in the day. Just the fact that everybody knew about Street Fighter 2 was crazy. It was everywhere. It was literally everywhere. You could not avoid it at all. We know the story of how Raul Julia got in there and whatever like that, but Street Fighter movie, they got Jean-Claude Van Damme. Jean-Claude Van Damme was kind of big at that time, at least, but they got Jean-Claude Van Damme into that movie, which was pretty crazy, right? I mean, as the main character, you can get like really famous people as cameos, like Christopher Lambert as Raiden, etc., etc. They got Jean-Claude Van Damme in the Street Fighter movie, which was just absolutely wild. God, it was everywhere. I wish there is a way that people could see that. If you guys don't know, obviously the EVO Awards are this coming weekend. One of the things that they're doing is they're inducting people into the FGC Hall of Fame. And two of the people that they are inducting early on right away are Alex Valle and John Choi. We're gonna take a look at this little interview clip from John Choi.
There was no internet back then, right? It was all word of mouth. So yeah, I got hooked and ride my bike to every little 7-Eleven, you know, liquor store, video store to try to play different people, and it just kind of naturally progressed from there. Golfland and the central arcades was very influential, and then eventually, you know, you learn to find where crowded locations are with a lot of competition. And for me, it was San Jose Golfland. I remember Street Fighter 2, there was like 5 machines, which is unheard of back then, right? And then I remember when Championship Edition came out, they ordered 10 Championship Edition cabinets that arrived. So if you wanted to play locally in San Jose, that was the spot.
They bought 10 Champion Edition cabinets for the arcade. 10 Champion Edition cabinets. Understand that an arcade thrived by its variety. You didn't repeat a machine unless it was like Dragon's Lair or something like that, which might be actually the third closest game to get kind of achieving that weird pop culture craziness. Even the biggest arcade games back in the day, you never had multiple machines of them. You just had the one and everyone just took turns in play. Even Super Mario Brothers was big in the arcade, just one cabinet in the arcade. Pac-Man, most of the time, it's just one Pac-Man machine, or you went to the liquor store, or you went to the video store, or the gas station. Me, my brother, and my dad, we would drive to a gas station that had Pac-Man there. And Street Fighter 2 did the same thing. Liquor stores, gas stations. One of them was at a random-ass video store in the middle of my high school town in Redlands. Like, in this tiny little video store, there was a Street Fighter 2 cabinet. And I was just like, what? Why? You know, it's crazy. And so for Golfland to get 10 machines to play Champion Edition is unprecedented. It's unheard of. When I was at UCLA, I worked at the arcade for a while. I was really good friends with the manager who ran it because he just saw me there all the time. Even before I started working at the arcade, he would always come up to me and be like, "You ever heard of this fighting game?" I'm like, yeah, I have actually. He's like, "How is it? Should I get it? Is it popular? Like, do people want it?" Like, he would actually start asking me for advice. Still one of my favorite stories. So like, I was working in food services for my first 3 years of college. By my 4th year, I was like, I am not doing food services anymore. Everyone wanted the UCLA arcade job. That was like the coveted job on campus. Like, everybody wanted to work at the video arcade on campus. It was notoriously very hard to even get an interview. And so like, I walked up to the manager at the time. His name was Eric, and actually him and his brother still manage arcades and stuff like that in Southern California on college campuses and stuff like that. I run into his brother Harrison a lot every once in a while. I was like, "Hey, are you guys hiring right now?" And Eric, the manager, was like, "Not right now." "Why do you ask?" Like, he was just like, "No, we're not hiring right now." And like, after a few seconds of silence, he was like, "Why do you ask?" And I was like, "I was hoping to like maybe try to apply here because I just want to like leave the food services and whatever like that." And he was like, "Let's see if we can make something work." He was like, "Let's meet up this day." And so like, we met. I walked into the back office. I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "So you want to work here, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "All right." I literally think that was the entire interview. I think after that, we just started talking about something else. But, you know, once I actually started working there, you know, one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is coin collection. Back in the day, because you put quarters into the machines, and what did the quarters do? They went through the mechanism, gave you the credit, and fell in a bucket. There's literally nothing technologically advanced about an arcade machine. You put a quarter in, it slid through, hit a little switch that gave you a credit, and then it dropped into a bucket. The thing about it is you have no idea how much these games made, right? And not only that, but if you never cleared out the bucket, eventually the game would just start, like, it wouldn't work anymore because like the coins would just get stuck in the chute. And so every Monday morning at the UCLA arcade, they had what was called Coin Day, which basically you walked into the arcade an hour before it opened, you go to every machine, open the bottom door and take out the bucket, pour them all into a giant quarter counting machine, one bucket at a time. So you could be like, okay, this game made this much this week, game made this much this week, this game made this much this week. And so that's what you did for old arcades. You would just, that's how you counted how much you made. It's crazy because then that means like if you're an arcade owner and you don't want to do this every day because it's tedious. So if you do it once a week, you really only know how much you earned for the week once a week, which is kind of rough, right? But I was talking to my manager about this, and like I said, we did this every Monday morning, and he was talking to me. He told me the story that back during Champion Edition days, they had like 6 head-to-head cabinets, which means 12 cabinets, okay? So there's American machine, back-to-back, and you play it on opposite sides, first player, second player. They had like 6 back-to-back head-to-head machines in the arcade, right in the middle. He told me with 6 machines, and keep in mind, that's 12 cabinets, so the first player and the second player coins were going into separate buckets. He said that was the only time, the whole time that he's been working there, they had to do coin collection twice a week. He said they had to do it Monday morning and they would do it again on Wednesday morning, because if they didn't, the Street Fighter machines would fill up, overflow, and like they would stop working. So only for Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition were they actually collecting the coins twice a week. That was the only time they did that. There was no local. This is just students on campus. The students just went there and played. Some people would come from outside of the arcade to come and play, including Amir, if you know him. He's the wonder kid from Third Strike, like one of the best Chun-Li's in the US right now in Third Strike. Amir, who jumps into my stream every once in a while, is like, hey James, do you want to play some Street Fighter? I'm like, no, because he used to piss me off back in the day during Alpha 3. Oh my God, I hated fighting him so much. He was like one of my demons. He's always been one of my demons. So I never want to play him because he's just gonna make me mad. Yeah, it's been 20 years and I'm not over it. I'm definitely not over it. So yeah, Street Fighter 2 was so gigantic. And it's, like I said, we literally had no internet back then. And that's how big and popular it was.
It was Tuesday,